Again, welcome today. And today, 26th of September, is also, I want to remind everybody, devotees of the path of self-realization, that today is the celebration day of the Mahasamadhi of Lahiri Mahashaya, who I have on my little altar behind me here. He passed away, and we remember him, that great saint, that great exponent of the Bhagavad Gita and the exponent of the science of Kriya Yoga at the command of Mahavatar Babaji, spreading the teachings of Kriya throughout the world. Today, I'd like to continue our discussion of what we began last week in our introductory lecture on overcoming harmful emotions. And today I want to start with a story. I had heard this story at the ashram of Swami Satchidananda in Coimbatore, where he was from, and he had an ashram there. But he spent many, many years in the United States, and I had the good fortune to meet Swami Satchidananda many times. He was a disciple of the great Swami Shivananda of Rishikesh, and had taken his masters, his gurus' teachings around the world, and had settled, had a number of ashrams and started them in America. And there's a story of his life was when he was a young man. Now, actually, he might have still been a youth, still living in his parents' home, but he was at that age, probably in the teenage years, young or early 20s, still in the home of his father. And his father had a very bad temper. He would get angry, and it was habitual, as often it is when people are angry people, for whatever reason, they have that bad habit. And there was one day that his father got very, very angry with somebody in the household. Perhaps it was a servant, perhaps it was somebody else. He got very angry and just went into a rage, in a tirade. And as this was going on, and there was other people present at that time and in the household, and as his father was raging and come to a certain point of in his tirade, Swami Satchidananda took, at that time, he was not a Swami at that time, he went and there was a vase, flower vase of some sort, a very nice one in the room there where they were. He went to it and he took it, and he took it and he threw it on the ground and smashed it into a million pieces. And his father was shocked. And his father says, "Why did you do that? There's a beautiful vase. What in the world were you thinking to do that?" And Swami Satchidananda, still a youth, he says, "Father, that vase is broken into 1,000 pieces. Your anger and rage breaks the spirit of other people in the same way into 1,000 pieces. Can I take those pieces and reconstruct that vase? Can you reconstruct the spirits that you're destroying by your anger in the same way? You cannot." And his father, and he said, and Swami Satchidananda didn't say this in anger. He said it in a very calm, forceful way. Now, think about this. This is a son speaking to his father in this way. Now, that's not usually done. But his father was shocked. But apparently his father was wise enough to recognize the truth of what his son was saying to him. And he stopped. And he came to a revelation to him that his anger, he is out of control, and that yes, he was destroying the lives of those people around him, his family, other people. Because who likes to be in the presence of an angry person, somebody that goes into rages like that? It completely destroys the spirit of other people. And so it was, and in this case as well. And this is how it is, not just with anger, but of course anger is one of the most, you might say, strong emotions, negative emotions that seem to, from time to time, they possess us. You could say that a negative emotion is like a thief that comes in. We let that thief into our house, we invite it into the house, and they come and they steal our peace of mind. They steal the equanimity of everybody around us. They steal our any inner joy, and they're like a demon, you might say, that sometimes possess us. And I think anger is like that in some ways. When you experience a fit of anger, it's as if you don't have control. It's just something comes over you, and you find yourself helpless almost, and you go into a state of anger, and then this emotion comes over you. And I think all of us probably at one time have suffered from anger of one sort or another, maybe not as badly as I'm saying here about Swami Satchidananda's father, but you know what that feels like. It just comes on, and you get these flashes of anger. And you afterwards, of course, there's a residual after effect of that. Of course, you feel remorseful. You realize you've caused pain, you've caused disharmony, you've broken relationships, and eventually you come to the understanding, if you're devotees, you just created a wheel of karma. You've spun it, you've spun it very quickly, and you put into motion things that you're going to have to pay the price for ultimately. And think about who wants to be around somebody that's angry. You drive other people away, and you could say that it's extremely demagnetizing for you. The ability to attract what you really want in life is destroyed by anger, which pushes everything away. And it's this major emotion of anger is often also accompanied by other emotions as well that are, you might say, there's a suite of them that comes, just like you buy software. You get a whole suite of things that are related, intertwined by that. And so consequently, you get anger is also expressed in grievance. Many people are driven by that in light. Revenge, all of these other things that come when we allow anger to come into our lives. In the Bhagavad Gita, we know the story there where we have the Pandavas and the Kauravas. And the Kauravas, the many brothers, the 100 brothers of the Kurus, but the chief brother is Duryodhana, and of course he represents king material desire. And king is Paramhansa Yogananda, and originally Lady Mahashaya explained that. And it's the ego reigning. The ego desire, when frustrated, thwarted, gives rise to anger. And so he has all of this army, and his brothers all represent one of the major negative emotions, you might say, or negative attitudes. And they're at war with those forces, the Pandava brothers, the forces that are trying to uplift us into the light. But they don't want to be uplifted into the light. And the forces of our emotion are those very strong reactions that we have to life that draw us down and glue us to our ego identity. And you could say at its heart, negative emotions and anger particularly are somewhat of they are a spiritual disease. But you might call them also, they're from the ego's point of view, they're an existential disease. They're threatening, or they're the overcoming of those emotions, the turning of the energy around that is invested in those emotions are an existential threat to the dominion of the ego over this kingdom of the soul. And they're pernicious also. And I think we all have these in one form or another, to one degree or another. And we realize, if we are introspective, we realize that in time these become habitual. Anger itself becomes habitual. It becomes ingrained. And you find people who have personalities that tend to be, he's got an angry personality. His view of life is such that he reacts that way, and he's become addicted to expressing his emotions in that way. And the I mentioned the word pernicious, and the pernicious thing about anger is that it gives us a certain temporary pleasure in a way. There's a hormonal element to it, a physiological element to it of these, all of these hormones are released, the adrenaline and whatever other ones that are accompanied it, they're released in the system, and we get a certain emotional high out of it, the release of that tension that comes when built up tension or frustration that things aren't going my way, and we just release it out. And this perverse pleasure comes over us in a it's negative, but yet there's some stimulation to it. And some people actually say, well, if I didn't get angry, life would just be somewhat of a neutral boredom, a blah feeling, you might say. And so consequently, I'd rather be angry than not feel anything. Well, it's not really. I mean, it's basically that anger, that feeling that we want to have. Yes, we do want to have deep feeling, but we want to learn to be able to express it in a positive way. And it's just become ingrained in people. And so in yoga, we often we'll say, we speak about the goal of yoga, and we've in our previous classes where we've talked about the Yoga Sutras, we've talked about overcoming the reactive process, and it's basically epitomized by anger, being able to overcome that. Anger epitomizes the reactive process. I don't like it, and we react. Something happened that didn't go according to my wishes. We react. And of course, what is this? This is basically ego involvement, and our ego has been thwarted. And in that sense, it is a spiritual disease. Ego desire for things to be a certain way or threatened. And it's like playing, Swami Kriyananda used to say it this way, it's like you're playing tennis and you hit the ball over the net to where the other person, your opponent, is not, and he complains, that's not fair. I'm angry. You hit the ball over there and where I can't reach it. And anger is an expression of that reaction. People don't like what has happened. And it's accompanied, you could say, you can't separate anger out from all the other emotions. They're all intertwined to some degree, interlinked, one leads to the next. But you could see anger comes too, it's related to fear that others won't listen to me, or they're not listening to me, or I'll be taken advantage of. If I don't get angry, I have to be able to protect myself. All of these things are interrelated, and we begin to express ourselves and habitually that way. And it may feel good temporarily, but we realize it's tremendously demagnetizing for our eventual success in life. We find ourselves guided in the wrong direction. We find ourselves, unfortunately, acting on that emotion of anger. And that, of course, leads to terrible consequences, and eventually a lot of karma comes out of that. So I think probably if my one piece of advice is that I've tried to live by is whenever I feel a negative emotion, and of course frustration and anger, those sorts of things come into me in just a little bit. I'm upset. Something didn't happen, and I react. I don't act on it, or I try not to. Or I don't make any decision based upon a negative emotion. Because inevitably, when you do make a decision based on a negative emotion, it's going to take you in a direction where you're not going to prosper by the results of that. So the first thing you could say is there's two elements when we're dealing with something like anger and pretty much any of these negative emotions. There's managing the anger, managing that emotion, that reactive process. And the second one is how to not be that way in the first place. But for I think we have to learn first to manage, to be able to gain control over a situation, and then we can begin to go in. Then, after that anger, that emotion, whatever it is, it's passed, you've dealt with it, and you've got it under control, then comes the time when we begin to introspect of why did this happen? What can I do about it? You see, then you're looking for a solution at that point, but in the midst of an emotion, you're not. You're just reacting. And one of the things don't do, I would say, don't make decisions based upon your anger. First manage it, get it to a point of neutrality, if not positivity. And then you begin to decide what's the right thing to do here, because then you're in control of yourself. And so you could say if you were to go online and there's or you could find many sites about how to manage your anger. Anger management classes are given. Oftentimes, when a person ends up in a judicial system, they end up getting arrested for some stupid thing they did. The judge will send them, well, you've got to take 10 weeks of anger management classes. Again, it's anger management. It's not overcoming it, it's managing it. And so consequently, the first thing when you get angry is you have to learn to stop whatever it is you're doing. If you can you can learn to recognize that anger when it comes. Be able to depersonalize. And this, of course, when we meditate, this is what we're doing. We're taking a step back to be able to observe ourselves dispassionately, taking the position of the observer as we meditate. Many other things are involved in that too, but one of the things is you see yourself, you see the waves of feeling and begin to recognize. And of course, this usually comes as we age. A teenager, a young person, a child, they have very little emotional control. And being able to gain that emotional control is part of the maturation process emotionally. Emotional, distance, you might say. And so you learn as you gain that, as you begin to watch yourself, observe yourself. And from that, you learn the lesson to simply stop. You get angry, stop. If you feel an emotion coming over you of any sort that's not positive, healthy, you learn to just stop what you're doing and to pause momentarily. Don't reason. It's not about reasoning why. It's just, I see it happening. Well, and then take a breath. And then do it again. Stop. You're about to say it. You're about to say that thing that you were not supposed to say, or out of emotion. Stop. And then observe what's happening. What's happening inside you? What do you feel? Recognize your feelings. Some people are so bottled up they can't recognize their own feeling, and don't rationalize it. It's just a matter of simply stopping what you're doing and then learning to, from that, getting control of yourself. And that's the old adage. They say, stop, count to 10. 1, 2, 3. And that's all of that's doing is putting a pause so you don't cause damage to yourself. Obviously, there's damage to other people, but this is for our benefit to be able to. And then from there, we can then begin to look into what else we can do. Why did this happen? What should we do? And we learn to recognize whether it's all of these emotions, we then be able to head it off to not get ourselves deeper into the mud, you might say. And from that, we then can look more positively at what we might be able to do once we can control that, and begin to analyze what's causing this, what might be a solution till we go. Now, somebody inevitably is going to bring up the question of, well, yeah, but there's sometimes anger you need it. You need to do this. People are taking advantage of you. This is happening. And of course, we don't mean that you just become passive and roll over, but it's controlling it's the emotion behind your behavior that we're speaking about here. Sometimes you have to act firmly. Sometimes you have to wear the clothing, you might say, of somebody who's, very firmly saying something and wants something to be changed or wants something to be done. It's like, the story of how Yogananda was one disciple was misbehaving, and he was strongly admonishing that, very loud voice and a stern voice, and just admonishing that person to change their behavior, as you might say, a angry father would do. And this other devotee was in the room when Master was doing this to this, and so Master, when he was pacing back and forth, and when he would pace toward that misbehaving devotee, was very strongly admonishing that person as if he was very angry. Then he would pace back toward the other devotee, and he would just smile, and he would kind of wink a little bit, maybe, and give them that impression that, look, I'm having to do this to get this message across to this person. And sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes you have to discipline others if you're in that position, or admonish something. But Master was always in his center. He was always loving in his center. It wasn't emotionally, but as that story about the snake, don't bite, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't hiss once in a while if it's necessary. But it's for purpose, under control. Yourself is under control, and this is what we're speaking about. Those feelings that come over and take us and begin to possess us. And there's also an example. People will say, well, what about when you see something wrong happening? Well, you do the appropriate thing, but you're in control. People call this, maybe, what about righteous anger? You see injustice in this world. Yes, there is injustice, and and you're fervent, you have fervor to right the wrong. But that's not the same as being emotionally angry. It's taking conscious action to behave in a certain way, to cure something, to fix something, like the doctor who must do surgery on a situation. Inside, they're in control, and they're not being driven by emotion. It's you might say it's driven by dharma, perhaps, to fix a right or wrong, but it's what's going on inside. And so this is a big topic, and I just would like to highlight a few points, and then we can open this up to questions. And if you have some questions, you can start writing them in the chat box. And so the first thing I'd say is, if you're about to be overcome, cause harm, obviously I said stop. Sometimes you need to do more than stop. Just leave. Change the situation. Get out of the room. Change the scene. Stop your speech. You can action. First, you can stop that. Next is speech. You're about to say it. Don't say it. Just stop. Stop your action. Stop your words. And much easier to control those than to control your thoughts or feelings. That comes later. But first, the expression of anger, learn to get it in control, because otherwise you'll go deeper into the mud. So you may have to withdraw yourself from the situation to avoid really unrepairable harm of breaking the vase or damaging yourself, others, relationships, your environment, whatever it is. And in order to do this, you have to be self-aware enough to recognize your feelings in the first place, to observe them. And of course, this is what the spiritual path is all about, is learning to gain that recognition of what's going on within you. And that does imply a certain removal of yourself, and take a more objective stance towards life, recognizing those feelings, and like I say, physically, maybe you need to go out, go for a run, go for a walk, sit calmly for a few moments. People say, well, I'm so angry, I'm going to go meditate. They're probably not going to meditate when in that mood, but at least you're not expressing it outwardly and causing harm to others. You can use affirmation, to affirmation. I know I'm calm and I'm peaceful. Now, you may not feel that way, but to say, well, I'm going to put my energy at least in a positive direction and do something worthwhile rather than expressing it outward. So where you could say what we're speaking about here by managing, we're controlling the expression of that anger. Go for a walk, perform some sort of physical something that's neutral or positive. Change your environment. Seek out positive company. people that are going to be calming to you, or you can express your to a neutral party. You can express your frustrations in such a way, and but not, this isn't being passive. It's doing something positive and construction. And but once the energy behind that, if you've subdued it, you might say, or subsided it, then you might say, then time comes, then you can look at what's positive. Feeling, you can meditate and feel try to get to that question of why, Lord, bringing the higher power. Why? What happened here? And being able to ask yourself, what is it within me that was frustrated? Why do I want to change? What happened that I cannot accept it? Learning to get to that point of calmness enough to be able to say, I don't like it, but it's what's come to me. How can I accept this frustration or what's ever happened? Help me, Lord, to be able to overcome that. Then these positive things come later, but not at the moment. And you could sort of say, then you can offer those feelings of anger, frustration, of hurt or pain. You can offer them. If you can gain them to the point of calmness and control of them, at least offer them up into the spiritual eye, offer them up to God, and say, help me, Lord. Asking for help to be able to overcome something that you observed within yourself. And you could say it comes a point then of turning your attention, because an anger is a movement of energy out, away from spirit, out toward ego, is what it is essentially at its basic level. What can we do to turn that flow of energy that's going outward toward the ego back into something positive? And of course, it's is looking for solutions to that, putting yourself in an environment that is supportive of that, talking to other people, finding people that you can relate it to. And it's not about bottling it up. Because I would say, well, if I don't release it, it's just going to get bottled up. And to some degree, that's actually true. It will get bottled up unless you find some positive outlet for that energy that is going outward in that way. And, that how do you do that? Something creative, to do something positive. Something you can actually even think about humor if you have the ability to laugh at yourself, if you can come to that point. And so humor can actually be helpful. But I would say don't let your humor go towards sarcasm, because sarcasm is actually an aggressive type of humor, and it's not actually that helpful. But it's diverting to something that is going to relax those emotions, diversion of your attention. Humorous films, calming music, go out and water your garden, go to the beach and lay in the warm sand, go to the park, go walk in nature. You can see all of these things. It's just to get over that feeling, and then you can start to go back and look at it from a spiritual point of view once you get to the point of overcoming. Swami Kriyananda gave a little writing here that a little quote I'd like to read. I mean, obviously, you could anger is caused by the frustration of frustrated desire. You want something to be a certain way, or the world is not happening in the way that you want it, and you get frustrated, and it leads to anger. But that's easy said, but not so. What do you do about that? And Swami Kriyananda wrote this. He said, examine your heart for any feelings of ill will toward others. Carefully uproot any such feeling and plant in its stead fragrant flowers of forgiveness. Only when your heart has been softened by universal benevolence may you hope to become receptive to the gentle vibrations of divine love. Do not imagine that you can win God's love until you have developed the power to win the love of man or mankind, of other people. And so consequently here he's giving a very high, you might say, solution. But we need to look at it this way, because from this high solution, we then can find iterations of that on some level that is going to really solve our problem. And if it's a spiritual disease, how do we cure it? Well, the highest cure here is what Swami is, you could say, is love. Positive benevolence. Once one has returned to the calm state, we have to overcome the tendency to be reactive to what happens outside of ourselves, and reaction happens when we're somewhat passive. Things happen, we want things to be a certain way. As long as they're going good, then we react positively. When they're not good, we react negatively. We have to step it up a little bit, our energy level, from that to something higher. We have to actually begin to practice positive benevolence. You see, and now love, of course, is the highest expression of that. But real positive benevolence is being a positive force for things in life. And of course, positive forces don't always lead to success immediately. But if our action is positive, there's an upward in any fashion. We're doing something creatively positive in our life. Even if it's just an outward expression of being creative, of building, of chopping wood, of doing something serviceful, it is a directional flow of energy that counteracts that tendency of life to go, or our reactions to go toward the ego outward. So those things, that anything that brings the energy in a positive way, and of course benevolence and love being the very highest expression, high expressions of that, learning to be adaptable to circumstances. People who are rigid in their attitudes toward life, toward things outside, it's a very, you could say, a Saturnian attitude, or low chakra attitude of being very rigid. And when life is not, this world cannot stand rigidity for long. It's always going to not be that way. The life is continually moving and flowing. And to be able to be unshaken when things change, be able to flow with change, to be calm, as Master said, in all circumstances, calm and unshaken. And essentially, it's a recognition, to the degree that we can recognize that we are separate from God. And when we realize that, and then having a desire for unity, a desire for God, and that puts us in a positive direction of wanting to be one with God, expresses itself in all the different ways of the spiritual path. But it comes first. It's not really practical to think we're going to be that way until we first learn to manage that negative emotion of anger. And this probably applies to most everything, all emotions. First, recognize. Second, manage and do something positively. Then introspect about it and try to figure out long-term solution. And this universal, the Swami just used to say, what is the secret of that? He says, when God, as he would say, this is his words, when God fills our heart, where is there room for anger? Now, one of the positive things we do, I want to mention here, and I've gone a little long already to leave time for questions, but one of the highest things we can do, aspire to do, is forgive. But true forgiveness is an expression of positive benevolence. And we don't forgive other people because, oh, they made me so angry. We don't forgive them for their benefit. I can't forgive that person. We do it for our benefit. And there's true forgiveness is of the heart. And then there's false forgiveness. Well, I forgive that person, and what he means, I'll tolerate that, but they were wrong to do that to me, but I'm going to forgive them. Look how good I am in forgiving them. I mean, that's a false forgiveness. It's not really forgiving. True forgiveness is a true change of heart. It's not action. It's not outward expression. You can forgive somebody and tolerate them, but in your heart you feel a great anger still. And that's not really forgiveness, you see, because it doesn't change us. It may give the outward appearance, but true forgiveness is realizing that we're all children of God. We're all in this together. And for our own sake, if we allow anger to fester within us, it's like a poison within us. It just festers in us. And ultimately, it degrades us. And it's something we have to learn little by little to be able to let something go. And that too is in stages, because yes, the other person did wrong, maybe. But that's in God's hands. Justice is mine, saith the Lord. To forgive means that you refuse in yourself to carry painful and grudges or hurt of any kind. And you're going to, if you don't, you're just going to carry them with you for the rest of your life. You are refusing to, to forgive means that I am refusing to cling to the resentment of whatever it is I feel, that I've been wronged in some way. Or you're giving yourself relief. It's for your own anger. And so you could say it's a spiritually, you're doing it for yourself, not for the other person. But you'll see, to the degree that you can manage that to some degree, doesn't mean you forget. It means that you change your own self first. And the light comes, if you can bring that light, invite that light, it pushes away all darkness in front of it. And thus, you could say, in this is time of year, we're in the festival season. It's that time of year when we celebrate the light. And that light, we want to bring it into the world, but first let's bring that light into our own hearts, and then it'll naturally shine through us to reach out to other people. So I'm sorry I went a little long again, like I usually do, but I'm going to open it up to chat here if we have chats. And I'm going to look at the chat box. What could be an alternative to express our strong objection about something to someone without being angry and still get the desired results? Well, you see, you're going to be able to, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get an end result. I want to make sure. Anger is not usually a good tactic, because it hardens our, just from a purely worldly point of view, it's not a good tactic. To show anger once in a while but not feel anger is sometimes you have to do that as a tactical measure to get another person to perhaps do something. But truly, to get somebody, you want to win that person in the long run. So what is it that's going to win that other person? Maybe it's being firm, but also knowing that you're on that person's side. You want to win them as a soul. And this is not in one day is this done. And so you could say, you have to, you catch the bees with honey, not with vinegar. And so you have to use what wins other people. Now you may feel, well, I'm being false. I don't think so, really. If it's a higher goal, your behavior is part of it. And this other person, you're trying to change another person's behavior. You have to certainly, to some degree, emulate the behavior you want to make that other person too. So you could say these are all strategic or tactical questions of how to win another person, your point of view, to get the desired results. What does it take? And usually anger and force are a shortcut for doing the hard work of actually changing another person, changing yourself, changing another person. So you feel you have to, force with blunt instrument of anger to get another person to change. Is that really true? Maybe you're not being creative enough to really use more subtle means to manipulate the situation, you might say, to get your desired results. But in the long run, anger will sometimes get the results you want in the short term, but is it the best long-term strategy? And I think you have to be more creative in that, into what wins people and gets the desired, there's carrots and there's sticks. And so we have to find what's going to work in the right situation. But it's for your benefit inside. You win if you can maintain your peace of mind. If you lose your peace of mind in anger, you've lost already. Because we're speaking not just for externals here, but for spiritual success from within each one of ourselves. What is the best way to teach children to control their anger, frustration, and destructive reactions? Very good question. This is the art of parenting. And obviously, it begins with the parenting demonstrating the right behavior first. So that's absolutely the first thing you have to do. And then you have to step by step, like Master and his devotee. Sometimes you have to be stern, but you're not inwardly, you're loving. And I think it basically, does your child respect you? Are you worthy of earning that respect? Do you have love for your child? Does a child love you? And I think you do love your child, obviously. The child loves you too. And we have to remember that that's there. And it gets covered up sometime. And so you have to, when things are bad in your behavior outwardly, you have to have your relationship based on a lot of positive that went before it. So consequently, if you ignore your child until they turn 12 or go into adolescence, and then you think you're going to be able to discipline that child, if you have no foundation of a loving relationship that begins from the birth of that child, caring, loving, you have a positive relationship. Then when the child goes wrong and makes mistakes, it's based on that loving relationship. So don't think you're going to be able to step in at the age of adolescence and then think you're going to influence if you have not begun when that child is very, very little. And so keep that in mind. So that's a whole class on child raising. I have a daughter, and experience has taught me some lessons. But anyway, sometimes anger is a pure energy break to the monotony or a block. What is the nature of yes, it's true that energy, it's all this energy gets blocked up in it's just a release of energy. And that's true. It does release, and it does sort of lets it out, and so that you can get moving in life again. I agree with that. That is what happens. But the problem with it is that it creates a lot of karma, negative karma for you. You're gonna have to pay the price for releasing that energy. And consequently, it doesn't solve the inherent problem of that block will start build. It is there. You released it, and then the gates close, and you're going to build it up again and again and again and again. Incarnations go by. So it's not a solution that is in the long term. It's a temporary release. And a lot of energy that is expressed negatively is strictly in that. So first you have to manage it. And then you start realizing that energy that is being released negatively in this direction can be managed, and I need to find positive ways to begin to release that energy to bring about the same sense of release that I feel in a positive way. It's true. And then you find that, sexual tension is a lot of that. I got to have this, I got all this sexual tension, and it gets frustrated, and a great deal of anger can be bottled up, and it's, I just got to release that, and they release it sexually. And yes, that's true. You feel this great, and that's part of the nature of sexual pleasure. But of course, then it just it just happens again and again and again and again. And which I'm not saying there is a place for sexuality particularly in a married couple's life, but without control, it just gets expressed in wrong ways. And many of the problems that couples have is the inability to control themselves and their energy, which sometimes, when frustrated, releases itself in anger that way. And can we use anger towards ourselves to change a bad habit? Use firmness toward yourself. To be angry with oneself, if you positively can direct it towards some positive result. I think in a colloquial terms, yeah, you can do that. I remember once many years ago, I expressed my anger to an office mate, a woman in the office that was doing something stupid, really, and I got angry at her. I regret it. That was decades ago, and I still think about it. I felt so bad. She broke into tears, and I just felt That was terrible, terrible, terrible. And I was so angry with myself afterwards. I said, I'm never, ever going to do that again. And I don't think I have. I think I've been a good office mate ever since. I've never, but I was, yes, I was so angry with myself to change, you see. And so I guess you could say that was a positive use of my anger, turning it back on my behavior. But of course it only works if it really makes some changes. And so, yeah, in that sense, I think I did. I think I haven't done it since. So I guess it was positive. But, firmness, I'm saying here, the emotion behind, that I'm going to be firm, I'm going to resolve, I'm going to do this. And I took it in that way. So these are okay, I think that's the last. These are things we change, but I think if I'm going to sum it up again, stop what you're doing. If you recognize, stop, get yourself calm, take a deep breath, and then introspect and change your behavior and do something positive. And immediately, if you have to skip some of those steps, you would say stop, immediately change your environment, do something positive, then come back, introspect, and what's at the root of this? And then try to put yourself taking that same anger, that energy, and putting it in a positive direction. Now, this doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen all in one big jump, but learning a little by little by little, and then realizing that the true solution is not just blocking, it's doing positive things, putting yourself in positive environments and positive benevolence, which may take the form of positive service, positive action, positivity in general. That's not, and releasing those blockages. You can feel that energy building up inside, and being able to release it positively and catching it. And as time goes by, I've noticed in my own life, if I get frustrated because I want something to happen, it's not happening, and I recognize that symptom, I can feel that little, oh, I'm going to say something. No, I'm not. Until I can say it in a positive frame of mind and be solution oriented. So anyway, these are a few thoughts to take into and if you have more questions, do submit them, and we'll come back next week and pick up and then go into the next one, because anger has its companions. And one of the major companions, and it's kind of related to it, is fear. And I'd like to go to move from anger into fear, but remember, there's connections between them, and we'll segue into that emotion next week. God bless all of you. See you next Monday.